started. Should I close the door?
It's an exclusive party. Yes.
No one's allowed in now.
Peyton, go paint downstairs.
So my name is Ethan Hardwick. Most of you know that. Hi, I'm Ethan. And I am doing my presentation based off of my capstone and honors thesis that I've been working on this semester. And it's about a radio program. So the name of the program is Engage, and what it is a community-involved religious program. So the title of this of my presentation included the name of the show, Engage, and also talks about creating captivating content. And this show in particular is meant to interact with a certain audience in a certain area. So there are considerations that I bring in from the station that it's going to be involved with, who the audience is going to be, what the content is, to kind of encapsulate all that together. So when I wanted to create this radio show for both my capstone and my thesis, what Dr. Emmer in the Honors College suggested was that I create it as something of a show proposal. So something that others who wanted to create a similar show could take out and look at, and they could see step by step the different pieces involved. So what you're going to see in my presentation is going to outline the specific areas that you would also see in the thesis. I'll try to condense some of that stuff for this presentation. So if I can get this thing to move. The buzzword. There we go. Okay, so the show objective. Engage is a half-hour radio show containing non-traditional, original, and engaging programming that connects the audience to the local Christian community, including churches, outreach organizations, and missionaries. So in the abstract of my thesis, I talk some about what typically Christian or religious programming looks like on the radio. And most of the time, what we see are syndicated programs on large networks of stations. The biggest example of this that I use some in my research is Moody Radio. They own hundreds of stations across the country and across the world. And if you look at the list of programs that they have on their website and you listen to some of their stations, what you get are pastors from some church with 20 or 30,000 people in a large city in the U.S. Or someone who's written books that have made it on the shelves of bookstores all over the country. Their voices from a large community rather than a small community. This is meant to be a local show that engages specifically with the local community, local churches, and includes local individuals. So that's the gist of it. We'll get into more detail there. But to give you some more detail on that, the mission and vision was the next section. That talks some about even what was mentioned, the objective. Provide religious programming to individuals unable to attend a regular Sunday church service. That's part of including it in the 11 a.m. Sunday morning. And there are also going to be individual segments that I'll talk about in the formatting section today. So the background. This is the slide that I thought was next. But with the background of this show, I'll have to talk some about the inspiration for it and some about the radio station it's going to air on. So the person who kind of provided the inspiration for this show is my father-in-law, Mark Farnsley. His dad was James Farnsley, who you see pictured there. And I think either the guy with the trumpet or the little arm you see there is my father-in-law, Mark, many 20 or 30 years ago. But what his dad, James, said is his dad was a pastor at a few different local churches at different times throughout his career. And he just had the old tape machines, reel-to-reel, things like that, a few microphones set up. His wife played piano, his sons were also musical. So they would record hymns, he would give his sermons and devotionals and things like that. And he would compile them into a radio program that would air every week on Sunday morning on local radio station WSBL. And that was in Shelby County, which is the county highlighted there. It's one of the donut counties, so to speak, surrounding Marion County and Indianapolis. And that's the area that I'm from originally as well. I grew up in Morristown, which is in the northeast corner of Shelby County. WSBL does not exist anymore. It was based in Shelbyville. It is now has new call letters, WSVX, and has changed ownership, also changed frequency in the past decade or so. And that also happens to be the radio station that I worked at my senior year of high school as a part of a co-op program with the local vocational school. And I wore my Giant 96 polo shirt today to kind of be, to harken back to that and kind of reminisce there. So that kind of gives you the background, some of the connections that came together. So my father-in-law gave me the idea for this show that he would like to create something in his father's legacy, a show similar to his that would be more relevant in today's culture, would be more relevant with the local churches in the area. And he also knew my connection to the radio station that I know the owners have produced for them in the past, and could get this show aired on the local station on Sunday mornings. So to just start off on format, it's a half-hour program as I mentioned, but 25 to 45 minutes is going to be the total runtime for the station. The station doesn't operate off of a strict minute-by-minute or hour-by-hour clock. It's a very flexible clock, so our show could also have a very flexible clock and not just fit into 30 minutes. When we talk about just the word formatting in radio or broadcast, it's really similar to, say, the word genre when we talk about music production. It can be all encapsulating from the style of vocal, what instruments are involved, to how those instruments are played, to how those instruments are typically recorded and captured. And even as engineers, we talk about different ways of processing and presenting that to the audience. Formatting in radio also encapsulates all those categories. So we can have different formats of radio stations as well as different formats of programming. So in this instance, we're talking about, all right, what kind of music do you have? How often is someone talking? When they're talking, are they talking like a normal person would talk to you, or are they talking at you at a shouty voice? So these are all things that together create what formatting is. So we're going to talk some more about formatting just for the show. Segment-based, as I mentioned, with 4 focus categories, which I'll get into more detail about. Flexible segment runtime. Consistent host, which will be myself, but one of the keys is various other voices from the community. That can be pastors from the churches that we network with. That can be volunteers that work there that do different programs. That might even be a local business owner that somehow is also involved in some kind of ministry. The point here is for it to capture an essence of the community. And the format of the radio station that we'll be on is CHR, which stands for Contemporary Hits Radio. Essentially, if it has been on the top 100 or top 40 charts, it makes it onto this radio station. So they play top 40 hits most of the time during the week. They have a few different hosts that provide the transitions for like breaks throughout the day, like they have a morning host, afternoon host, and an evening host. But something the station has continued to do is have Sunday morning programming that is religious. There have been a couple of different people that have come in and out of producing that content, or just getting sermons from local churches. And that's where this show can kind of fill a niche in their specific format, even though they're a CHR format. With this program itself, it'll have more of a talk style feel, since most of the content will be conversational. A lot of my background is also in public radio. I've worked for the Scene for the past 3 semesters at IPR, as well as been on-air announcer there for 3 years, so that's also a format I'm really used to and comfortable with. So since I'm going to be the producer for the show, that's kind of the influences that are going to be carried into this show. Is a little bit more of an NPR talk style feel, but it will air on a CHR station because of what they've allowed for their Sunday morning programming. So the different show segments are going to have 4 different focuses: theology and teaching, worship, community, and mission. And you can see here the purpose for each one of those. Just a very basic, this is what we want the listeners to get from this focus. And each episode will have a segment that falls into one of these 4 categories. In these categories, if you read my thesis, I have at least 2 examples for something we can do in this focus. So with theology teaching, it could be someone who comes to the studio with a devotional and gives a 3-minute just monologue on something. Another thing that's going to be really popular and also fits into the format of what other stations are doing is sermons from local churches that I'll collect. And something like that will be more like 15 minutes in the way this segment will run. So that's just one example. In every one of those categories, I have at least 2 or 3 ideas of different kinds of segments that will fill that requirement. And then the whole episode for each week will be made up of 4 unique pieces. And this is kind of an example of what that'll look like. These are what we call show clocks in radio. So you just see the hour time span. So if we take into half an hour, if we divided up the half hour into 4 equal spaces on the left, that's kind of what you'd see. You'd average 6 minutes, 45 seconds for each segment. But more what I'm going to be shooting for is the show clock that's on the right. We have some segments that last 2 minutes, some that last 5 minutes. Most likely, at least one segment a week that's going to be more like 15 minutes to fill a larger section, which in that example I put worship, so maybe part of a worship set from a local church band that we mix and master to put on the air would fill the majority of that episode. And then inside each one of those show structures, here's a quick example of what each one might look like. The top one is like, oh, okay, we're going to have an interview with a missionary who, say, does ministry at a local homeless shelter, okay? A certain portion of it would contain that interview, additional narrative from the host, and then we'd have the bookends of that. Some of the segments will be more like this worship segment at the bottom. Really simple. There's an opening, there's a closing, and there's the content in the middle. But something I wanted to point out here, and something that's kind of the hook, if you will, for what this show is about, is the name of the show, Engage. Every segment is going to have some sort of engage section to it. So more than just taking content from places and presenting it to people, we want to encourage people to become a part of the local community. Another part of the audience that this radio show will be for is unchurched individuals. People that share the belief system of people who attend a Sunday service, or that self-identify as Christians, but don't participate in a weekly service. So part of the purpose of this section is to present something that's going on in their local community, and to say, here's how you can get involved. If it's a worship segment, it can be as simple as, you heard the worship band of such and such church, they have weekly services at this time. And that's it. But the whole purpose of the show is, again, to encourage people to engage in and become a part of that local community more than just listening to the show. And that's something that I can accomplish with this that most programming can't, because, again, syndicated, one show fits all of the hundreds of stations that it's listened to all across the nation and the world. So these are a couple examples of scripts. And these are both from, again, really simple shows. The one on the left is what I'm going to call like from the local pulpit segment, and it just outlines the church we're going to hear from. I introduce what the pastor was talking about, and then we go straight into an excerpt of some sermon audio that he did. And then on the way out, for the Engage section, I say if you'd like to hear from that sermon in its entirety, you can go to their website. You can also hear his sermons in person by attending one of their Sunday morning services at 9:30 and 11 o'clock. So just 2 quick sentences. If you want to hear more, if you want to get more involved, here's how you do it. Every segment is going to have something like that. Getting content for this show. It's going to require networking with local ministries and, to most importantly, focus on what's already being collected. What's been really common in churches for at least 10 years, maybe longer, is that they record the Sunday morning sermon. And I remember growing up at my church, it was just a cassette recorder, right? Well, technology has gotten more advanced. We have more digital boards. We have more churches with computers in their tech environment. And so they're even recording to something digital and posting it on a podcast. The example you're going to hear today is something that the church posts every single week on their website. And more than that, what digital boards have given us access to is stems of the worship band, multi-track recordings of the worship band playing. And one of the audio examples I'll have for you this morning is one of the songs from a worship band that's mixed down for broadcast. And both of these things we're not asking very much of the organizations we're involved with. They really want to expand their reach. They really want to have more people hearing what's going on in their church, but maybe they don't have any kind of broadcast outlet beyond their website and a podcast. This is just me contacting them and saying, hey, what do you already have? And would you like me to put it on air for you? And then just developing that relationship of, every so many weeks I can go pick something up, or they can just email it or Dropbox it to me. A couple of the churches that I've talked to said, yeah, we've already got a Dropbox account that we upload the sermon to every week. I'll just add you to it. And there you go, there's content for the show. And no extra work had to be put in to get it. There have been a couple things that have been necessary then for acquiring the content. And I apologize, you can't read either one of those very well. But on the left, I have an overview of the show. My thesis is something like 20 pages long. I'm not going to go hand that to a church and say, here's my show and get involved with it. This is a one page. It has a few of the different categories: objective, audience, formatting, involvement, and a summary. And it's just something that they can read through, understand what we're about, and say, yes or no, we'd like to be involved. And so far, the churches that I've sent that to, leadership in the tech environments, and preaching leadership at the churches, have been really enthusiastic about what they've read in this. And even right away saying, yeah, this sounds awesome, how can we be involved? On the right is something even more boring than that, is a release form. And it's specifically for WSVX radio. It's not something they provided me with, but it's specifically for the radio station that it's going to be airing on, authorizing us to use the content that we collect. One thing that's unique about this authorization form from others that I've used with my time in radio is that it's even more flexible. In the past, we've had one for music, one for interviews, for different kinds of content. As you can see, the 4 lines at the top gives an area for us to describe exactly what it is that was collected, is going to be used, even to say, they have permission to use any of the sermons in the next 6 months. This allows me to go in somewhere, make a connection with someone, and go ahead and we'll sign off on the next so many months, letting you use our content. And then when that period is over, if we still like the way things are going, then we'll reauthorize for the next section. Otherwise, I would have to take one of these forms to a church or email it to someone every single week that I'm going to use one of their sermons, or every single week that I'm going to use one of their interviews, every single time I collect or use any piece. Not just that, but any time that I am going to use something I've already used in a different way, I might have to have a new authorization form. So I intentionally made this one really flexible to make as little work for me, and more importantly, as little work for the volunteer organizations that I'm really asking help on this project. So I was going to play for you guys a couple examples of the kind of content I'm getting. The first one is the worship band at my home church, Fountain Town Christian Church. That was the first place I wanted to reach out to for content. And this was actually mixed and mastered by one of the tech people there who really loves doing music production on the side and has said, as much as I have time to, I'll mix and master this stuff for you because I enjoy doing it. So here's just a quick example of that.
This is amazing grace. This is a failing love. That you would take my place.
So that's an example of something we might use maybe 1 or 2 songs from. We might, as much as we can, include almost all of a particular worship service from a church. Again, it came from a church that has a digital board, and they just were really easily able to collect the stems and multi-track mix it for me. And this is an example from the same church of a sermon that was
So as we
on
stop and we
Sunday.
think about this and we discover a little bit more, we realize that Joshua went into battle. We need to go into battle, but how? How do we do that? How do we fight against this one who comes against us? Well, I believe that we need...
So, that, for example, isn't quite the same quality of getting someone to come into a studio and maybe record an interview with me or deliver a devotional. So as often as it's appropriate, I'd like to still have someone do that. But again, churches are already collecting maybe the audio just from the Cruddy microphone that they use on a Sunday morning service. And I just downloaded that from their website. I didn't even need to make contact with a tech person. I just asked the pastor for permission to use it. So it's really easy to collect that to then use it on the show. Kind of the last thing I'd like to talk about and cover just generically is copyright reporting for the project. For especially any show that wants to be syndicated, this gets really, really important. It's not going to be as big of a consideration since this show right now will only air on one station. But still, the responsibility of an original show to the station is to provide them basic information about what is on each episode. And that is just basic information, especially about the music that airs, if I do have music from like the worship bands, so that when they have to report to a PRO like BMI or ASCAP, that they have that information. In order to do that, I did some research with some stations about like what their reporting procedures are. I was able to get this radio log that BMI at one point required radio stations to fill out, and it just has basic information like what program was it on, the name of the song, artist, even like album information, things like that. On the right is what I'm electing to do with the show, and that is just a plain text Excel document. And what I found out when I was talking to stations about their copyright reporting is this is what they do. Something super informal, again, plain text. I just give them this list of song titles and artists and numbers so that whatever system they have to use to report, whether it be online or a form or something else, that they can just copy and paste it really easy. Another thing that I want to mention, I think there's even a bullet point about it before. With this show, there's a consideration with the PR of FCCLA, which is, I can never remember exactly what it stands for, but it's an international copywriting organization for Christian licensing. And a lot of churches use CCLI to get permission to play songs and put lyrics on the screens and everything else. So when I'm including the reporting information for the worship music from churches, I am also including the CCLI catalog number, because most of those songs are registered through CCLI rather than one of the other major PROs. So if you guys want to see more of it, the copy of the actual thesis, these audio examples, as well as audio examples of me actually hosting and forming some of the segments, will be available at my website, hardwickaudio.com/thesis. I plan on turning in the thesis before the end of next week, before finals wrap up. And at that time, more information will be available at that link. So, if you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Do you plan on doing any live content at all, or is it all going to be pre-recorded?
It's all going to be pre-recorded right now. I'm not sure what live content would look like, other than we know that this particular week for an entire half hour we're going to have these guests, and it could be a live interview. I don't foresee that it's going to be super easy or even all that worth it to, say, transmit from a remote location. I don't know that there's the, like say, transmit from a church service to the radio station and out on the airwaves. If that's something the radio station would like to see and the churches would like to see, I'm up for it, but that hasn't been a consideration for this show, at least not yet. So, yeah. Anything else?
If you notice that their content isn't quite good enough or quite usable, you could ask if they want any evaluation, kind of check out their system, and that'd be a way to apply your skills. It's another kind of sideline you could do, is helping churches with their audio setups, and that'd be kind of a nice service for them in exchange for helping you out. giving you content, and that might up the quality, and then you can just get it online, and they don't have to come in, and you don't have to go record.
Yeah, and that's even where a little bit the inspiration for this show came from, is when I was working at this radio station, they would frequently get recordings from the churches that were like really distorted, or on the other end you could hardly even hear the person. And when I was working for the station, I actually visited a couple of churches to help them with their audio setup. And so for one, that inspired me to want to create a show with higher standards than that, for one, but also to be able to reach out in that way. So
Any other ideas for the engaged part, since it's not a big network and you're not using social media, it might be in a more elderly crowd. Having these community events, I think, is nice. Any other ways to engage the listeners?
Well, the whole idea with the engaged portion is, again, to be like 2 or 3 sentence little blurb, like basic information to equip the listener to react to it if they want to. I think that might also mean, again, like you said, for the elderly generation of listeners, to include a phone number rather than a website, could be, for instance. I think that's also where the service times are good, or maybe just quickly mentioning another event that's going on outside the Sunday morning time slot, if that's not available for the listeners. I also really like when radio stations include like liners from artists that they include. We just got one for The Scene from Kevin Ray when he was around, saying, "This is Kevin Ray from Walk the Moon, you're listening to The Scene on IPR." Like, we could just have, whatever person was featured in that segment say, "You're listening to Engage on WSVX." And, include some of those voices that are recurring, doing the Engage section rather than always being my voice, begging people to get involved, or, hearing the same thing over and over again. So
That's one of the things people like about attending services, is being part of a community, and if people are listening at home, they're not getting that, so anything you can do to get people interacting with each other. I wonder if there's a easy way to record. I think Google Voice, you can leave a message. You could have a phone number and have people call in and give comments, or make prayer requests, and at the end of the program you could have, I think it's Radio Lab that does this. At the end of the program, they have people reading the announcements for Radio Lab, but on their answering machine. It might be nice to kind of mix in some voices from the listeners at the end of the program.
Yeah, to be more interactive and more two-sided. Yeah.
I'm Josie, and I need help with my aunt's sick, and could everybody pray for Maybelline, and be a nice thing with the community.
Yeah.
I would make the release. Could you make it to you as the producer of Engage, and not necessarily tie it to the radio station? So if in 6 months you wanted to syndicate it, and you could do anything you wanted with it.
I have considered that, and one of the biggest considerations there is that the show right now isn't its own entity. There would have to be some kind of corporation set up, or even a nonprofit organization for the show to be a standalone and be able to own rights to anything. And right now, since it's going to just be on one station, it's easier, makes more sense to get permission for that station than the others. I would just have to retroactively get permission for what content I wanted to reuse, I suppose.
And just keep it in mind, if you're, depending how the show goes, you could kind of turn this into your program that you're playing on that station, but it's really designed to be in this local community, so it's probably not something that you're going to try to put on other places anyway.
Yeah, perhaps surrounding counties or something like that, but it does become a point where the reach for the show is more effective the smaller it is. So, and that's one of the things that was great about James Farnsley's show, is that it was a local pastor, and it was a local station, and it was just the local community listening to it. So, yeah. Anything else? All right. Thank you, guys.